So this is not an LS engine. This is a 2JZ out of a Lexus GS300. I'm gonna go more into detail about why I chose to go this route in a different video. Never taken one apart before, but I spent most of this week watching a lot of videos on how to take them apart. So the teardown should be simple enough. I'm gonna start with draining the fluid out of it. There is a oil drain on the pan, obviously, and then there's also a coolant drain on the side of these blocks, which is pretty cool. I did not know that. So yeah, we're gonna get the fluids drained out of this and then we'll start taking this apart. I'm gonna try to retain most of the factory accessories if I can. But yeah, I'm gonna try to separate this into things that I will be reusing and things that I will not be reusing. So as I work on getting this upper timing cover off of here, I kind of just wanted to remind everybody, this is not the official way to take apart a 2JZ. If you really want to do it by the book, you can just get a factory service manual. I'm kind of just tearing into this thing, and I think by the time I'm done with this, we're going to have a fully disassembled engine without anything broken. So all these electrical connectors on the harness, I don't know what Toyota made these out of. I think they made them out of glass because they're pretty fragile. So I definitely kind of had a few disintegrate on me while I was taking this engine apart. It wasn't too bad, and I don't really plan on reusing this harness anyway, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But that might be something that you want to be mindful of when you're taking yours apart. I decided to pull the upper part of this intake separately from the rest. Not really sure if you need to do that or not, but it opened things up a little bit, and it gave me some access to the ignition coils. So these were pretty grimy, and I don't think I realized just how bad the oil leak was until I pulled them out and looked at them, but they were totally covered in dirt and crud. And you can see on this one, somebody replaced that connector, I think, because that connector really didn't look too grand. You can see just how brittle everything is on this engine. Even the vacuum lines were practically crumbling apart when I took them off. Now I'm planning on reusing all of the factory accessories from this engine, so I was being extra careful here with any wiring specific to the AC compressor or the alternator, etc., because I might not be reusing this harness, but there's a fair chance I might end up having to reuse those connectors and just splicing them into whatever harness I make. So you can see I'm kind of jumping around in what I'm taking off. I get kind of bored, and I can't really stay focused on one thing. So I was kind of just hopping around this engine, taking off whatever I felt like taking off. And it doesn't really matter. In the end, it's all going to come off of there one way or another. Finally got that wiring harness off. Like I said, not going to reuse that, but I did try to keep it intact, just in case I need it for any type of reference. This is a vacuum canister for emissions purposes. Obviously not going to need that. So with everything else removed and all the bolts out, I was able to pull off the intake runners. And you can see it's a little dirty in there, a little milky, but that's okay. We're going to get this head all cleaned up before it goes back together. So going back to the front of the engine, we're going to take some more of these accessories off of here. And after you remove the alternator, it's a good idea to take that stud out of the engine block. It's on a pretty small ear, and it's pretty easy to accidentally break it off if you're moving your block around or walking by it. So I just went ahead and took it out of there. As you can see, it was literally finger tight. You can see me here looking around for that last bolt and then finally realizing it's that extra long one there. So there's a lot of nuts and bolts holding the AC compressor bracket on there. I believe it also is the power steering bracket. But once you get all of those off, you can finally slide the whole bracket and the compressor off. And after this, I decided to go ahead and tackle the crank bolt. And as you can see, really was not on there very tight. Everybody says that these are on there really tight. I got my biggest impact gun, and it kind of just zapped it right off without much issue. So I did need a puller to take off the balancer. Not a big deal there. Did eventually wobble off. And now I can go ahead and take off the lower timing cover. So I got the engine lined up at top dead center, and once I got that tensioner out of there, I was able to just slide the belt right off of the engine, no issues. And at this point, I got a little bored of taking bolts out of the water pump, so I decided to take off my valve covers. I was kind of curious to see how they looked, And these really didn't look too bad. Definitely a little on the dark side, definitely pretty gold. But I hadn't really seen anything too concerning yet that would stop me from just reusing these cams after I rebuild the engine. This is one of the heater hoses that goes into the car to the heater core. I would probably just recommend taking this off before you take off your valve covers, so it's out of your way. I don't know why I didn't take it off first, but I'm just going to go ahead and take it off now. And this is the other heater core hose, which is attached to the thermostat housing. So I'm going to try to just take off this whole assembly all in one go. And there's a couple bolts back here for it. I think these are 12 millimeter. There's one on the back as well. I had to get a wobbly socket out for that guy. But once I got that out, the whole assembly just pulled right off of there. And you can see there's a gasket there. If you buy the OEM seal kit from Toyota, the engine reseal kit, you'll get all of those little fiddly gaskets in the kit. So it's a little on the expensive side, but if you don't like it when your engine leaks, I would say just buy the OEM kit. And after I got those last couple bolts out, I was able to just pull off the entire water pump assembly. You can see this crank sensor definitely looks a little tired. It was functional, so I don't know if I'm going to be reusing that or not. We'll see how it looks after I clean it up a little bit. And you can see that the crank timing sprocket was a little stuck on there. Not too bad. I was basically able to just pull it off with a puller by twisting the puller by hand. So definitely wasn't seized on there by any means. Alright, so we're going to work on taking off this VVTI oil line here. There's just a large banjo bolt on the top and the bottom, and that one small bracket that I had to take off of that coolant neck. And you can see here, there's a small filter for that oil feed line. And normally it comes out with a bolt, but on mine I had to fish it out of there with some tweezers. So when you're taking off the oil filter housing assembly, just remember that there's actually a sensor on here, which you want to take off before you take out the large bolt that actually holds the filter assembly onto the engine block. This guy was a little tight, so I did have to break it loose with a breaker bar, but it kind of just slides out once you get it loosened up. And make sure you save that bolt, because that is a special bolt specifically for this. Alright, next I'm going to take off my NOx sensors. Now, just a little tip, if you are planning on painting your engine block before you reassemble, make sure that you mask off the area that these NOx sensors are mated to. You want that to be bare metal. I'm going to take off my cam sensor now. I believe these cam sensors are only on the VVTI engines, so if you have a non-VVTI engine, you won't have this sensor on the head.
I'm going to pop out this VVTI solenoid, and it is finally time to take off our cam gears at this point. So let me just tell you right now, these cam gears on my engine were incredibly tight. There's this kind of this cover bolt here, and once you take that cover bolt off, you'll get to the actual bolt that's holding the cam gear onto the cam. Now, you only want to loosen this center bolt. Those smaller bolts on the outside of the cam gear, you want to leave those alone. Don't take those out. But you can see I was really struggling with getting this thing off of here. I had to use some pipe extensions on both my ratchet and on the pliers that were holding the cam in place. And you can see I really had to kind of crank on this to get that bolt loose. But eventually I did get it loose and it came off. Nothing broke. And quite frankly, the other side was just as bad as this one. Now, if I remember correctly, the factory service manual does have a specific torque sequence to follow when you're taking these bolts out. But really, all you need to do here is make sure that you are loosening all of the cam caps evenly. You don't want to totally take one off and then completely take off the next one. It should be a slow and gradual process to get these out of here. And eventually, you will be able to just pop the cam out completely. You'll probably feel it loosen up a little bit as you are loosening up the bolts. But once you get them all off, you can pretty much just lift the cam right out of there. And when you're doing the intake side, there are two small Allen head bolts on the frontmost cam cap, the one that actually houses that VVTI solenoid. Don't forget to take those out. Realistically, you could just go ahead and take them out first, and that way you don't forget about it. But you don't want to take out every other bolt and then realize, oh, never took out these two tiny little Allen bolts. So go ahead and make sure you take those out. Loosen up all the bolts evenly, and then you can take off the intake cam. So what I'm doing now is I'm cleaning all the oil off of the cam buckets, and the reason I'm doing this is every single one of these buckets has a specific shim that comes on it from the factory, and that sets the valve lash. So when I put this engine back together, I want to make sure that I put all these buckets back in the correct spot, and the easiest way to do that is to just mark every single one with a Sharpie marker. So grab a small magnet like this and make sure it's nice and clean. And you can pretty much just stick it straight onto the top of those buckets and give it a little twist, and they will pull right out of there. They are they're a pretty snug fit in there. They shouldn't be tight. They should be easy to take out. But I found that sometimes I had to give them just a little bit of a twist. I don't know why I didn't do this sooner, but I never took the spark plugs out, so I'm just going to go ahead and crack them loose now, take them all out of there, and then we can talk about taking out the head bolts. The head bolts on 2JZs are not a normal size socket. These are, at least in my case, I've seen conflicting information on this. Mine are M12 triple square heads, and I had to get some triple square drives just for this. I will probably never use them again. And then the other thing that you really want to keep in mind is before you take these off, get a screwdriver and dig out the heads of these bolts, because mine were filled with gunk, and I'm not just talking loose oil. I mean, there was crud in there that would stop me from fully inserting this this driver into them. So make sure that you do that before you pull your head off. You really don't want to strip a bolt out. It sucks. So just make sure that you clean them out and make sure that you have the correct driver. I don't know if Toyota changed what bolts they were using on certain years or certain 2JZs, but in my case they are without a doubt M12 triple square. And like I said, I cleaned out these bolt heads, so I have just a couple more to clean out, and then we're gonna pull this head off. And this is where the camera operator messed up a little bit, because I cleaned out these bolts and then I forgot to record me actually taking the bolts out of there. So here's what the head looks like. I'm going to throw the removal sequence up on the screen. You want to make sure that you remove those bolts in the correct order. And it's actually the opposite order when you're installing the head, but that's for a different video. Now, before I work on getting these pistons out of there, I took a rag and soaked it in acetone, and I'm trying to clean off some of that carbon that's on the very top of the cylinder walls. You don't have to take that carbon out of there, but it definitely makes taking the pistons and rods out just a little easier. All right, now here's the deal. These lower oil pans are practically glued on there. So I ran around the edge of it with a razor blade a couple times. And then I took this really thin, flexible putty knife and I kind of hammered it in there. Now, the block girdle, the upper oil pan, whatever you want to call it, it is aluminum. So try not to, hammer a screwdriver in there. You don't really want to mar up that surface. If you scrape it up a little bit, it's not a big deal. The RTV will still seal it. But that's the best way that I found to get them off there. I see a lot of people just trying to hammer them off, and that Toyota RTV is really no joke. So you're probably going to have a hard time getting it off of there unless you split the seam first with some sort of putty knife or some sort of scraper, utility knife, whatever. I'm going to take out this oil level sensor now, and that's just 4 small bolts on the outside. And now we're at the point where we can actually start taking out all these bolts for the block girdle / upper oil pan. And don't forget about the last couple that are inside of here as well. So once you get all the bolts out, there are some pry points on here, and I did just use a screwdriver here. And hilariously, this actually came apart a lot easier than the lower oil pan came off. But it did just pry right off of there. and didn't really give me too much trouble. Obviously, I'm doing things a little out of order, and I'm taking off the flex plate now. You can definitely make an argument for taking off the flex plate and the rear main seal housing before you put it on a stand. It's a little cramped in here, but I kind of just forgot about it before I put it on the stand. And I didn't really feel like taking it back off of the stand once it was on here, so I just did it now. And I kind of just had barely enough room to do it, but it wasn't the worst thing in the world. Now, I've heard a couple people say to loosen up these rod bolts just a little bit and then give a couple slight taps on the cap of the rod, and that helps separate the two halves, and it just makes it a little easier to take out the piston and the rod. But I didn't really have any trouble. I kind of forgot about it, and mine came out fine. I think it's a bigger issue on GTE rods because I believe the GTE rods have pins to align everything. I don't believe that the GE VVTI rods do. Frankly, I don't really remember. But regardless, if you're having trouble getting them out of there, just give a little tap on the cap of the rod and it'll separate it. Alright, so moving forward, I'm going to take off my oil pump now. This is a GE oil pump. It is not a GTE oil pump, and I am not going to be reusing this guy. I'm going to be going with a GTE oil pump on my new setup. Similar to when you're taking out the head bolts, when you are removing the main cap bolts, you want to start loosening from the outermost caps and work your way to the center cap. Once you have them all cracked loose, it doesn't really matter how you get them out from that point. But for the initial loosening, make sure you start from the outside. And I was just loosening these all the way, and then I kind of left them in the holes just a little bit, and that let me wiggle the caps back and forth. Made it a lot easier to take those caps out. But the center cap, there's really no wiggle room there because you've got your thrust bearings. So I don't really know if you're supposed to do this or not, but I cheated a little bit and I kind of just wiggled it loose using the crank itself.
All right, so we got this whole thing taken apart. It's actually about a week later now. I got everything laid out on the table, organized. I did kind of sort this into things that I'm going to be keeping and things that I'm not going to be reusing. So this whole table is mostly stuff I'm going to be reusing. I do have the pistons and rods here, but we're not going to be reusing these ones, obviously. This engine was not in bad shape for how bad it looked. It had quite a few oil leaks, so there's oil all over the block, the head, the oil pan, the girdle, everything is just absolutely coated in oil. The bores themselves do look pretty good. I can still visually see cross-hatching in these bores, in these cylinder walls, but I can't really feel it. I mean, they feel very, very smooth. So chances are pretty good that I will just do kind of like a simple hone on these cylinders to get a little bit of cross-hatching back into them. Now, the cams look pretty much fantastic. Same goes for the buckets. No real visible wear on them. At least nothing worse than what you would expect from a used engine. Now, obviously, all of these front accessories are absolutely coated in oil. So we're going to have to clean those up. The starter and the alternator are definitely not factory. They look far too fresh to be factory. I don't know exactly what brand they are, but the yard that I bought this engine from said that it was running and driving. So obviously the starter works. This alternator might be a little iffy. I might have to upgrade the alternator just a little bit. I don't know anything about this. There's no label on it, no brand of any sort. So I appreciate you guys coming with me on this little journey. Like I said, I've never taken a 2JZ apart. It really was not that bad. It was not too hard to take apart. A little mad I forgot to film me removing the head, but oh well. I guess can't really redo that. So hopefully I can get the last couple parts that I need, and then I can make a video about how to assemble one of these things, and then we can start putting it in the Z.